A pretender is one who claims entitlement to an unavailable position of honor or rank. Most often it refers to a former monarch, or descendant thereof, whose throne is occupied or claimed by a rival, or has been abolished. Although claimant is sometimes preferred, the term in itself is not pejorative. The original meaning of the English word pretend, from the French word prétendre, means to put forward, to profess or claim. This predates today's more common English meaning of pretend, which is to claim falsely. The term pretender applies not only to claimants with arguably genuine rights to the throne who regarded the de facto monarch as a usurper, but also to impostors with wholly fabricated claims. People in the latter category often assume the identities of deceased or missing royalty, and are sometimes referred to for clarity as false pretenders or royal impersonators. A papal pretender is called an anti-pope. Modern pretenders. Pretenders in the Roman Empire. Ancient Rome knew many pretenders to the offices making up the title of Roman Emperor, especially during the crisis of the 3rd century. These are customarily referred to as the 30 Tyrants, which was an allusion to the 30 Tyrants of Athens some 500 years earlier, although the comparison is questionable, and the Romans were separate aspirants, not a committee of public safety. The Loeb translation of the appropriate chapter of the Augustan history therefore represents the Latin Triginta tyranny by 30 pretenders. To avoid this artificial and confusing parallel, not all of them were afterwards considered pretenders. Several were actually successful in becoming emperor, at least in part of the empire, for a brief period. Greek pretenders. Byzantine Empire disputed successions to the Roman Empire long continued at Constantinople. Most seriously, after the fall of Constantinople to the Fourth Crusade in 1204, and its eventual recovery by Michael VIII Palaeologus, there came to be 3 Byzantine successor states, each of which claimed to be the Roman Empire, and several Latin claimants to the Latin Empire the Crusaders had set up in its place. At times, some of these states and titles were subjected to multiple claims. Cypriot pretenders following the defeat and death of King James III of Cyprus in 1474, his younger and illegitimate brother, Eugene Matteo de Lusignan, also styled Damiani, removed to Sicily, then to Malta. He was acknowledged as rightful heir to the thrones of Cyprus, Armenia, Jerusalem, and Antioch, although he never made serious efforts to pursue the claims. The title of Baron de Baccarie was created in 1508 for Jacques Matteo d'Armenia, with the remainder to his descendants in perpetuity. Eugene, illegitimate son of King Jack II of Cyprus, had, when his family were exiled, first gone to Naples, then Sicily, then settled on Malta, marrying a Sicilian heiress, Donna Parola Mazzara, with issue. Modern Greece. The claimant to the throne of the last Greek kingdom is Constantine II, who reigned as king from 1964 to 1973. He belongs to the House of Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Glücksburg, a cadet branch of the House of Oldenburg. His designated heir is his son Pavlos, Crown Prince of Greece. French pretenders. The establishment of the First Republic and the execution of Louis XVI in 1793 led to the king's son becoming pretender to the abolished throne, styled as Louis XVII. As Louis XVII was a child and imprisoned in Paris by the revolutionaries, his uncle, the Comte de Provence, proclaimed himself regent in his nephew's name. After Louis XVII died in 1795, the Comte de Provence became pretender himself, as Louis XVIII. Louis XVIII was restored to the throne in 1814, and was succeeded by his brother Charles X in 1824. Charles X was, however, forced into exile by the July Revolution. Charles X and his son, the Dauphin Louis Antoine, abdicated their claims in favor of Charles's grandson, the Duke of Bordeaux. However, their cousin, the Duke of Orleans, a descendant of Louis XIV's younger brother, mounted the throne as Louis Philippe. For most of the July monarchy, the Legitimists France, as supporters of the exiled line came to be known, were uncertain of whom to support. Some believed the abdication of Charles and his son legal, and recognized the young Chambord as king, while others maintained that abdication was unconstitutional in France of the ancient regime, and continued to recognize first Charles X and then Louis Antoine, until the latter's death in 1844. On his uncle's death, Bordeaux proclaimed himself king as Henry V, but remains known to history by his title of pretense, the Count of Chambord. In 1848, Louis Philippe was himself overthrown by the February Revolution, and abdicated the throne in favor of his young grandson, the Philippe, Comte de Paris. However, a republic was proclaimed, leaving Paris, like his cousin Chambord, merely a pretender to a no longer existing crown. Over the next several decades, there were several attempts at a so-called fusion, to unite both groups of monarchists in support of the childless Chambord as king, who would recognize the Count of Paris as his heir. Those efforts failed in the 1850s, but after the establishment of the Third Republic in 1870, when a royalist majority was elected to the Chamber of Deputies, fusion again became the royalist strategy. As a result, in 1873 the Count of Paris withdrew his own bid for the throne and recognized Chambord as legitimate pretender to the French crown. In spite of this apparent unity among royalist forces, restoration of the monarchy was not to be. Chambord refused to accept the tricolour flag, which rendered him unacceptable to most Frenchmen as a constitutional king. The monarchists hoped that after Chambord's death they could unite behind the Orleanist candidate. Chambord died in exile in 1883, but France's royalists had lost their majority in Parliament by 1877. The erstwhile Orleanist Adolphe Thiers called Chambord the French Washington, i.e., the true founder of the Republic. In 1883 the majority of French monarchists accepted the Count of Paris as rightful pretender to the French throne. A minority of ultra-reactionaries, the so-called Blanquists d'Espagne, continued to withhold support from the House of Orleans and chose instead Juan, Count of Montezon, the Carlist pretender to the Spanish throne, who also happened to be the senior male descendant of Louis XIV. The arguments are, on one side, that Louis XIV's younger grandson, Philip de Bourbon, Duke of Anjou, renounced any future claim to the French throne when he left France to become King of Spain as Philip V in 1700, leaving the Dukes of Orleans as heirs to the throne of France in the event of extinction of descendants of Louis XIV's elder grandson, Louis, Duke of Burgundy, which occurred in 1883. On the other side, Anjou's renunciation is held to be invalid because prior to the Revolution it was a fundamental tenet of the French monarchy that the crown could never be diverted from the rightful heir of Hugh Capet. Moreover, although the Orleans volunteered to defer their rival claim to the throne after 1873, the regicidal vote of their ancestor Philippe Égalité in 1789 and the usurpation of Louis Philippe in 1830 are alleged to have extinguished all rights to the throne for the Orleans branch. The schism has continued to the present day, with supporters of the senior line reclaiming the title of legitimist, leaving their opponent royalists to be known, once again, as Orleanists. The current representative of the senior line is Louis Alphonse, Duke of Anjou, the senior living descendant of Hugh Capet, who was born and raised in Spain. The Orleanist line, which returned to live in France when its law of banishment was repealed in 1950, is represented by Henry, Count of Paris, Duke of France, senior male line descendant of King Louis Philippe. In addition to these two claims to the historic royal throne of France, there has also been a pretender to the imperial throne of France, created first by Napoleon Bonaparte in 1804 and recreated by his nephew Emperor Napoleon III in 1852. This claim is today disputed between Jean-Christophe, Prince Napoleon, and his own father, the self-avowed Republican Prince Charles Napoleon. both descendants of Napoleon I's youngest brother, Jérôme Bonaparte. Russian pretenders. There is much debate over who is the legitimate heir to the Russian throne, and bitter dispute within the family itself. Grand Duchess Maria Vladimirovna is considered by some to be the legitimate heir. She is the only child of Grand Duke Vladimir, who died in 1992, a great-grandson of Tsar Alexander II, whom some considered the last male dynast of the House of Romanov. Some of her opponents believe she is ineligible to claim the throne because she was born of a marriage that would have been deemed morganatic under Russia's monarchy, which was abolished in 1917. Others oppose her for reasons similar to those of anti-Orleanists. Her father's and grandfather's perceived disloyalty and dynastic ambition are seen as vitiating any rights which might otherwise have belonged to her branch of the former dynasty. Still others maintain that the severe, pre-revolutionary marital rules of the Romanovs leave no one who can claim to be rightful heir to the dynasty's legacy. Others recognized Nicholas Romanov, Prince of Russia, as head of the family, being a descendant of Emperor Nicholas I and the elected president of the Romanov Family Association, which consists of most living descendants of the Romanov emperors. He had no sons, and since his death his younger brother, Prince Dmitry Romanov, occupies the same genealogical position. Anna Anderson attempted to prove she was Grand Duchess Anastasia Nikolaevna of Russia, the lost daughter of Nicholas II, but DNA testing on her remains eventually proved her to be an impersonator. Although she did not claim the throne, per se, as women could not succeed to the Russian throne so long as any male dynast survived, she became more famous than any of the various Russian claimants to the throne. English, Scottish, Welsh and British pretenders. England, Scotland and Great Britain pretenders to the thrones of the United Kingdom and its predecessor realms, as well as the other historical jurisdictions that are modernly England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, have existed from time to time. Lambert Simnel was a pretender to the throne of England. His claim to be the Earl of Warwick in 1487 threatened the newly established reign of King Henry VII. This was just after the Wars of the Roses. He was just a boy but was used to try to take over the kingdom. Perkin Warbeck, a Fleming who tried twice to invade England and capture the throne. After the execution of Charles I in 1649, his son Charles II became pretender until his restoration 11 years later. In later times, the chief claim was that of the Jacobites. After the overthrow of the Catholic James II and Seven in the Glorious Revolution in 1688, many refused to accept the legality of the new regime of William and Mary, James's Protestant daughter and son-in-law, and continued to recognize James as king. James made a significant effort in 1690 to recover Ireland, but was defeated by William at the Battle of the Boyne. After James's death, his supporters recognized his son, James Francis Edward Stuart, the Roman Catholic son of the deposed King James VII and II. James was barred from the succession to the throne by the Act of Settlement 1701. Notwithstanding the Act of Union 1707, he claimed the separate thrones of Scotland, as James VIII, and of England and Ireland, as James III, until his death in 1766. In Jacobite terms, Acts of Parliament after 1688 did not receive the required royal assent of the legitimate Jacobite monarch and, therefore, were without legal effect. James was responsible for a number of conspiracies and rebellions, particularly in the Highlands of Scotland. The most notable was the 15, which took place in 1715–16. Charles Edward Stuart, James' elder son, the would-be Charles III, known as Bonnie Prince Charlie, led in his father's name the last major Jacobite rebellion, the 45, in 1745–46. He died in 1788, without legitimate issue. Henry Benedict Stuart, a younger brother of Charles Edward, a Roman Catholic cardinal, best known as the Cardinal Duke of York, took up the claim to the throne as the would-be Henry IX of England, though he was the final Jacobite heir to publicly do so. He died unmarried in 1807. After 1807, the line of James II and VII became extinct, as the Jacobites had ceased to have much political significance after the failure of the 45. The movement became essentially completely dormant after Henry's death. Genealogically, the next most line to the English and Scottish thrones was through James II's youngest sister, Henriette Anne, whose daughter had married into the House of Savoy. To the very limited extent that Jacobitism survived the death of Cardinal York, they supported the claims of this line. Its current representative is Franz, Duke of Bavaria, though he himself does not claim the title. His secretary having announced once that HRM is very content being a Prince of Bavaria. Wales. Owain Glyndwr is probably the best-known Welsh pretender, though whether he was pretender or Prince of Wales depends upon one's source of information. Llywelyn ap Griffith ap Llywelyn, who died in 1282, was the only Prince of Wales whose status as ruler was formally recognised by the English crown, though 3 of the 4 men who claimed the throne of Gwynedd between the assumption of the title by Owain Gwynedd in the 1160s and the loss of Welsh independence in 1283 also used the title or similar. Mad Dog ap Llywelyn also briefly used the title during his revolt of 1294-5. Since 1301, the title of Prince of Wales has been given to the eldest living son of the King or Queen Regnant of England. The word living is important. Upon the death of Arthur, Prince of Wales, Henry VII invested his second son, the future Henry VIII, with the title. The title is not automatic, however, but merges into the crown when a prince dies or accedes to the throne, and has to be reconferred by the sovereign. Nevertheless, it is Glyndwr whom many remember as the last native Prince of Wales. He was indeed proclaimed Prince of Wales by his supporters on 16 September 1400, and his revolt in quest of Welsh independence was not quashed by Henry IV until 1409. Later, however, one of Glyndwr's cousins, Owain Tudor, would marry the widow of Henry V, and their grandson would become Henry VII, from whom the current British monarch is descended. The various minor kingdoms that came together to form what is today known as the Principality of Wales each had their own royal dynasty. The most important of these realms were Gwyneth, Powys and Deheubarth. After 878, the ruling dynasties in these kingdoms each claimed descent from the sons of Rhodri Mawr who had conquered them or otherwise achieved their thrones during his reign. Myrfanfraig, the father of Rhodri Mawr, had come to power in Gwynedd because the native dynasty, known as the House of Cynedda, had expired. Myrfan was descended from royalty through his own father Gryde and claimed ancestors from among the rulers of British Reged. It was acknowledged by all of the realms of Wales after the time of Rhodri Mawr that the House of Gwynedd was senior and a homage should be paid by each of them to the King of Gwynedd. After the reign of Owain ap Gruffydd of Gwynedd, the realm began to merge with the concept of a Principality of Wales. This was realized by Owain's descendant Llywelyn ap Gruffydd in 1267. It was not to last in this new Wales was invaded by England and dismantled between 1277 and 1284. All of the descendants of Llywelyn, the last, and his brothers were either imprisoned or killed. Surviving members of the House of Aberfraw descended in the male line from Rhodri ab Owain Gwynedd in the guise of the Wyn and Anwyl families. Other surviving cadet branches of the Aberfraw and other Welsh princely houses have also survived into the modern age. Irish pretenders. The business of Irish pretenders is rather more complicated because of the nature of kingship in Ireland before the Norman takeover of 1171. In both Ireland and early Gaelic Scotland, succession to kingship was elective, often by contest, according to a system known as tanistry. The High King of Ireland was essentially a ceremonial, pseudo-federal overlord, who exercised actual power only within the realm of which he was actually king. Because of the laws of succession, there could not be a pretender to this title in the sense it is normally understood. From the 5th century onwards the kingship tended to remain within the dynasty of the Ieni-Acutal until Brian Boru of Munster wrested control of much of Ireland from Mael Secnal Mac Domhnaill in 1002. Following his death in 1014 and that of Mael Secnal in 1022, the struggle for dominance resulted in Norman intervention from Henry II of England in 1171. There were later attempts by Irish rulers fighting against the Normans to revive the High Kingship, such as in 1258 when Brian Uaeni-Acutil of Senil, Owen was so acknowledged, in 1262 when the crown was offered to Haakon IV of Norway, and in 1315 when an offer was made to the Scottish Edward Bruce. Effectively, however, the title was in abeyance, not even used by the kings of England. Some Irish rebels discussed offering the Irish throne to Prince Joachim of Prussia before the 1916 Easter Rising. After the failure of the Rising, the offer was, of course, never made. But had he been crowned, and Ireland had subsequently become a republic, Joachim's son, Franz Wilhelm, would be an Irish pretender, and, afterward, his son, George of Russia, would be an Irish as well as a Russian pretender. Ottoman pretenders. Sem Sultan, eldest son born during the reign of his father, Mehmet the Conqueror, claimed the Sultanate, although he was defeated in battle months later by his eldest brother Bayezid II. He fled to the island of Rhodes, then eventually to the Papal territories. His descendants claimed Sem Sultan rights until Malta defeated the Ottomans in the 16th century. After the Ottoman Empire was abolished, and the Republic of Turkey came into power, the successive heads of the Ottoman family claimed the throne of the Turkish Empire.